Welcome to an interview edition of the Legal Current podcast. Here's Leonard Lee.
One of the hottest topics in technologies these days is NFTs, non-fungible tokens. Forget cryptocurrency and metaverse, that is so last year. But what is an NFT, and what are some of the legal implications if a business or other organization is seeking to set up their own NFT marketplace? Joining us today is Louis Lehot, business and technology partner with Foley Lardner LLP in Silicon Valley. Louis, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Leonard. And what we're seeing is that as new businesses look to monetize their products, they're looking at non-fungible tokens as a new revenue stream for that business and a new way to expand in the market. And if you're going to have an NFT, you're going to need an NFT marketplace, whether you host it yourself or you contract with a third party. And we at Foley Lardner have built an NFT task force of multidisciplinary lawyers who can help businesses really think through how to do this from A to Z, from what I call garage to global. And Leonard, that starts with who owns the non-fungible token and who has the right to monetize it. And so if it's a piece of music, if it's a video recording of an NBA basketball game, if it's a painting, the rights to the intellectual property behind that non-fungible token are the first thing that need to be secured. And I thought that was a good place to start our conversation, Leonard. And thank you so much for having me on your show.
I think this will be of interest to many people, but let's back up a bit. As I sort of mentioned off the top, most of us have heard something about NFTs or non-fungible tokens, but may not know beyond that, hey, we heard that an NFT of a cat meme sold for several $1 million. Let's back up and sort of set the ground rules. Can you briefly define for us what an NFT or a non-fungible token is?
It's using blockchain technology. A non-fungible token is an item of media that's minted to document digital ownership of an underlying physical or digital asset, and it constitutes a unique certificate of authenticity. Now, the blockchain provides protection and transferability, which is enabled by distributed ledger technology, Leonard. And NFTs can represent anything from tweets to real estate to a cat meme, as you pointed out. Ultimately, they're digital collectibles. They're different from other blockchain-based assets like Bitcoin or Ether or stablecoins because those assets are identical, interchangeable, and ultimately fungible, like a dollar bill. An NFT represents a non-fungible divisible and transferable piece of ownership and a distinct asset. So while many NFTs are issued on the Ethereum blockchain or the Solana blockchain, new NFT-based protocols are being launched independently of those more extensive networks. And NFT marketplaces are mushrooming to process purchases and sales of assets and to enable peer-to-peer transactions, Leonard.
So now that we've established, what a non-fungible token is, and certainly many people and businesses out there are creating NFTs, transacting in them, who or what sort of a business or entity is likely to be involved in establishing an NFT marketplace?
Well, we at Foley Lardner have helped content creators and media properties all over the ecosystem come to the NFT marketplace to monetize. And so we help the Milwaukee Bucks and the Utah Jazz and several sports franchises bring items of unique content to the NFT world and monetize those. We've helped artists, we've helped musicians. We represent a really exciting new NFT marketplace called Snow Crash Markets. And Snow Crash a couple of weeks ago announced its launch in partnership with Sony Music and Universal Music to monetize their libraries. The founder group included Walter DeBrouwer and Jesse Dillon and Jeff Rosen. Walter is a well-known Silicon Valley entrepreneur. Jesse Dillon has a studio in Hollywood, and Jeff Rosen has represented artists for years. And so together they are building this marketplace called Snow Crash in partnership with Sony and Universal to help monetize musical properties for musicians.
Now, in creating a NFT marketplace, certainly I think people initially think in terms of the technological aspect, dealing with the blockchain, setting up transactions, and so on and so forth. But it sounds like there are a myriad of legal considerations that come into mind. Certainly IP and creators' rights come to mind, but in terms of the entity that is participating and creating the NFT marketplace, maybe just to name a couple. So it can be a bit of a rabbit hole, I'm sure, but let's start with what are some of the key legal considerations that anyone seeking to establish an NFT marketplace really needs to keep in mind from the get-go?
Right. So it's a great question, Leonard. And who are the players in the ecosystem that we're talking about? So first, you have the content creator, the musician, the artist, the sports franchise, the artist who drew the cat in the cat meme. These are people that are not technologists necessarily, but they're artists or content creators, and they are the ones who are looking to come to the market and monetize their asset. You have next, you'll have technologists who can create a smart contract and who can take that content and put it onto a certificate of authenticity, which is a blockchain minted asset. Then you have the marketplace itself, is where is this asset bought and sold. Then you have who is it that processes the payments, so the payment processor or the money transmitter. You then have the wallet provider. Where does this asset live? Where do you hold it? Where do you custody it? You have exchanges for the payment form of payment and where that lives. So those are the people in the ecosystem. If you're going to be launching an NFT marketplace, you're really bringing all of these pieces together in a new company. It's probably a Delaware C corporation that is securing the rights to mint the coin, and then who is going to take the proceeds from the sale of NFTs and revert them to the intellectual property owners and then the owners of the marketplace, and then distribute payments accordingly. Now, if you want to distribute payments, Leonard, you need to be what's called a money transmitter in the United States. And that might require a federal registration as well as registration in any state or municipality that requires registration. And yes, that's all 50 states. It's the city of New York and lots of other municipalities. That process can take anywhere from 6 months to a year, and it can involve a pretty heavy legal work stream. And so many NFT marketplaces decide that they're not up for that, and they would rather contract with a money transmitter that already has their license. And so that person would then be taking a cut of the proceeds of a primary sale and a secondary sale. So you've got to have an agreement with whoever that money transmitter is. You then, if you're going to be in the NFT marketplace, you have to decide what is the form of payment. Is it going to be fiat currency, dollars, or is it going to be some form of digital currency, Bitcoin, Ether, Solana, what have you? And there you'll have to partner with whoever is the exchange that lists those forms of payment. So is it Coinbase? Is it FTX? Is it Binance? And then there is, where do you actually go on the internet to mint that coin? Is it going to be OpenSea, which is a leading NFT marketplace? So that gives you a sense of who the players are, Leonard, in forming your entity and getting it off the ground.
Of all those factors that you just mentioned, Louis, are there any that are particularly paramount and are critical you have to get right from the beginning? Or conversely, are there any of those factors that you mentioned that you see most frequently neglected when people are setting up an NFT marketplace?
Yeah, that's a great question. What I see neglected often in the Web3 universe is compliance with financial regulations like FinCEN's rules on registering as a money transmitter. But that's really way down the line when you've already secured the rights to the intellectual property. So I think the first thing you need to do is form your entity with the various members of the team that are going to come and join a new company and form that entity. If you're going to be raising third-party capital, it's probably a Delaware C corporation. If you're going to be minting your own token, a fungible asset to be the money for your NFT marketplace, you might do that offshore for various reasons we can get into. But I think the first challenge after the company formation, which I've already gone over, is securing the rights to the intellectual property. And so when you think about a piece of art, Leonard, or a piece of unique content, whether it's music, it's a digital painting, or it's a reproduction of some video, think about if you're reproducing a clip of NBA basketball, a famous basketball player doing a slam dunk and wanting to mint an NFT of that moment in time. You got to think of, there's the National Basketball Association, there are the television rights that were sold by the NBA, there's the team, and so each of those players has the right to some revenue stream, and there's some contract that exists that define what those rights are, and whether or not somebody in that chain has the right to further monetize the video by minting it as an NFT, Leonard. And so really understanding what those who the stakeholders are and making sure that you've complied with all of their various rights is the first thing.
Now, you mentioned regulatory, and certainly in terms of the financial regulatory aspects, since it is transactional, but are there particular regulatory considerations? And at the same time, is this somewhat analogous to, crypto? And I understand, yeah, crypto's a currency, it's a financial instrument, so that's, in that sense, completely different. But the reason I raise crypto is it similar to the extent that we're likely to see some sort of regulatory framework emerging around NFTs, or for that matter, around blockchain, which certainly could impact, how NFTs develop?
Great question. And I think where you're going is this a security? And there's been great debate over the last, I'd say, 6 years since we saw the first craze of initial coin offerings in 2016, 2017, of businesses that were selling instruments that for cash, with which they took the cash and they built a network. And that failed a Supreme Court test as to whether an instrument was a security insofar as it became an investment contract where people are coming together to build an enterprise with which they will share profits. And so after the initial craze of initial coin offerings of 2017, 18, there was a bit of a clampdown by the Securities and Exchange Commission in Washington, which is the regulator of the securities industry, that these were unregistered securities that were not being sold in compliance with existing regulations. And so NFTs are designed to be not securities by definition because they are not fungible assets. They are unique, and as long as you consult with good counsel, and follow the rules of the road, you should be able to build an NFT marketplace without registration with the SEC. So what are the kind of the hot buttons, Leonard, that can get you in trouble when you're building an NFT marketplace? And that is if you take the proceeds from the NFT and you build out your network. So that's one area where you can get into trouble. Another area where you can get into trouble is if you were to take a single asset, let's say a building in New York City, and fractionalize the ownership of that digital asset by creating an NFT that represents not the whole building, but just an interest in the building. And that in and of itself is an investment contract, rendering it a security, which would require registration or some exemption. So non-fungible tokens, again, as long as you haven't fractionalized it and you haven't taken the proceeds to go build a network, should be an instrument that need not be sold in compliance with the securities laws because it is not a security. That really is the area that we're all watching, Leonard, to make sure that we understand what that is.
But at the end of the day, when you stir all of this together that we've been discussing here, what really lies ahead, do you think, for NFTs, and what should people be on the watch for?
There are a whole lot of industries that can really benefit from the development of NFTs and that can be disrupted. There can be amazing economies of scale created. And I'm just going to give you one example, and that I'm going to talk about my client Propy, which is trying to create an NFT marketplace for real estate. At Propy, they have already sold 2 pieces of property using an NFT, and the way we did that is, and imagine all of the stakeholders in a real estate transaction for a piece of, let's call it a house. You've got a real estate agent for the buyer and for the seller. You've got a title agent. You've got mortgage a broker. You have the recording at the county, and maybe at the state, and obviously the buyer and the seller. You've got a lot of players in that transaction, and a lot of people that are taking a commission in this process, which takes months and months. And imagine if you could put that piece of property in an LLC, and you could create a smart contract that gives the holder of the smart contract control of the LLC, and then you could put that LLC and trade it on an exchange. You've really just disrupted the real estate industry. And so that's one of the businesses and business models that my friends at Propy are looking to disrupt. And that's just one example of what's coming down the road and one of the many use cases for an NFT.
Disruption is a good word to describe that. NFTs, non-fungible tokens, I guarantee we'll all be hearing more about them in the months and years ahead. Louis Lehot, business and technology partner with Foley and Lardner LLP, thanks for a fascinating discussion today.
Leonard, I really appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.